What's up, Kansas City? I'm your host, Glenn Brian Frizzell. Today we are taping at the historic Lincoln Building right here in the heart of Kansas City, the 18th and Vine District. Today's special guest in honor of Black History Month, What's Up, Kansas City? You may recognize her from the titles of such books as Their Eyes Were Watching God. We have distinguished Harlem Renaissance author Zora Neale Hurston.
Well, thank you, Mr. Frizzell. It's so nice to be here. I appreciate this. But you did leave off that I'm an anthropologist, a novelist, a folklorist, and I direct plays on Broadway. I do some of everything, honey, and I think all the people in Kansas City ought to know that.
Oh, yes, I was a little tongue-tied. You have to excuse me. I'm in the presence of royalty.
That's okay. You just cute. It's all right.
Now we're going to find out a little bit more about us. Those who do not know you will find a little bit more about you. I understand you were born in the 1890s. Your real birth date in Alabama?
Well, I think that it's just shameful of you to say that for me. Now, I was born in 1901 in Eatonville, Florida. Now, I understand that some people want to make a lie out of me and say that I was older than I am, but I'm not old.
No, we don't want to make a lie.
Oh, okay, but don't believe those people. Don't believe those people, honey. And Eatonville is my home. I was raised in Eatonville. Eatonville is what I know. So when people talk about Alabama, they really don't know me at all.
Tell us a little bit about Eatonville. I understand your father was pastor, mayor.
My father was everything, you know, and when I got to New York, it was a little hard for me to understand why those people in New York didn't understand how very special they were. And then it came to me that they didn't have Eatonville. See, Eatonville was the first all-Negro incorporated town in this country. And my father was the mayor. My father was pastor. We had our own grocery stores, our own post office. We had good schools, so we didn't need jails. So everybody in Eatonville knew how special they were. And then when we got to New York, I found all of these colored people who just didn't understand. And they were buying tickets for Marcus Garvey to go back to Africa. And most of them had never even been there the first place. So I don't know how you can go back to some place you've never been to. But they didn't know how special they were because they didn't have Eatonville.
Sure, I understand Eatonville sounds like a very, very special place, Miss Hurston.
Yes.
And also your inspiration behind the novel Their Eyes Were Watching God.
It is. And you know, Janie more than Eatonville was my inspiration because I wanted all girls to know that they could have some power on their own. Because we lived in a time now, and you know this now, men don't always acknowledge this, but women don't always know how much power they have. So I had Janie in my head, and I knew that Janie had to tell the story to other women that they did have power. And I love Janie, and she represents me and a certain amount of her actions, just the good ones, you see, because I had a good love.
Now, I read that novel at Howard University. Can you tell us how you got from Eatonville to Howard University, your alma mater as well?
You went to Howard?
I went to Howard.
Oh, my goodness.
That's
you
right.
know, when I was in Washington, D.C., and I was at the bottom of that hill looking up at Howard, and I promised her that if I ever got to go to school there, that I would never make her ashamed of me. Because, you know, Howard is the capstone of Negro education.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I saw, yeah, it is. And I saw this man coming down from the hill, and he had on a suit and a briefcase, and it looked like he was real important. So I went over to him, and I asked him that if he could make it possible for me to go to that school, then I would take care of his house for him. I would clean and cook for him. I'd done the same thing for my brother Bob, and he didn't send me to school not one day. Well, he thought I was kidding at first, but I was dead serious. So he went home and he talked to his wife, and his wife said, okay, and that's how I got to Howard University, the capstone of Negro education.
And hard work has always been a theme of your life. You've
Yes.
worked hard in every arena, in every area that you've done. What did you do while you were at Howard?
I worked hard. I worked hard because I didn't have any money. My mother had died when I was a little girl, and my father married shortly after my mother died, and which would have been okay, except he married a woman who didn't like my mother's children, and we didn't like her neither. But anyway, my father ended up kicking me out, so I had to make my way most of my life. So when I got to Howard, then I was a manicurist. I do hair, I did maid work, I did everything so that I could stay in that school, because an education was really important to me.
We understand that was a rich experience for you as well. You moved to New York City in January. New York City, the city that never sleeps. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I understand you were living west 131st Street in Harlem?
Oh, goodness you did your homework. You just got my address and everything. I'd have been scared of you, boy, if I'd met you in Harlem, because you know too much.
I'm humble, man.
Harlem was a great place because people were leaving the South and they were leaving the country, and New York was that Mecca. You see, Harlem used to be all white, and then there was a man who owned a lot of the apartment buildings, and he tried to raise the rent, and all those white folks who lived there, they said they wasn't paying any more rent, and he told them, said, if you don't, I'll turn Harlem black, and they thought he was kidding. He wasn't kidding. He posted notices all through the South, and black folks started coming up, and they came one at a time, and usually a young man would come and he'd get a job, then he'd send for his wife and his kids and his mom, and the whole family would be there, and there were black folks all over the place. You know, my friend Langston Hughes, he wrote a poem once that said, I'd rather be a lamppost in Harlem than be the governor of Georgia, and he was right. There was so much excitement, but it was hard, too. Because the average black man in Harlem only made $21 a week. And the average black woman only made $17 a week. Mm-hmm. And black children were dying from consumption and pneumonia 800 times faster than the white kids. And black women were dying in childbirth 400 times faster. So it was a hard life. But it wasn't the South. And it wasn't that new kind of slavery that they were putting on people down there.
So did you, what's going on at Edenville while you were in New York now? Did you make it back home from time to time?
I went home because, you know, when you're not used to places like New York, they can drain you dry. And there would be sometimes I would just be drained dry. And I'd go back to Edenville because in Florida, even the land will feed you. You just walk down the street and pull some fruit off the trees and you could eat.
Next time you go take me.
I will.
I like the sound of the
You'd
fruit
love
and
it.
the trees.
Yeah, and it's
Citrus grove.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are in Harlem, but you did produce. You produced while you were there. Can you tell us what exactly was the Harlem Renaissance?
You know, I didn't know until after I'd written some of my books that people were calling it the Harlem Renaissance. Because we didn't call it that. We just knew that there were a whole bunch of black people who liked to write and draw. And I'm in Kansas City, and there's a man from down the road from Topeka, Aaron Douglas. Mm-hmm. And he was there too.
Dorothy West.
Yeah, and Langston Hughes had an uncle who had a barbershop right close to where we are now.
Really?
And all of these people were in Harlem, and I wanted to go see what they were doing, so I went there, and I made some friends, and Dr. Charles S. Johnson, he wanted to publish my work in his magazine. We had 2 colored magazines that were really important. Opportunity was one, and then there was The Messenger, and then there was The Crisis, and if you got published in any of those, then black folk all over the country read your work. And so I was there so I could write, and they would publish my work. And I had fun. We had parties. We had rent parties. If you didn't have enough money to pay your rent, you just threw a party and people would pay you a nickel to come in and party, and pretty soon you'd have rent money. And people were banded together. Father Divine, now he was actually stationed in Philadelphia. But he had places in New York, soup kitchens, and people could come there and they could eat and they could get coats, because those New York winters were harsh. But I always had Edenville to go back to when it got too cold.
Now, is it fair to say that you have been misrepresented when people have wrote about you? For one, I understand that you really didn't like W.E.B. Du Bois.
Well, you know, sometimes people take what they want to and they use it to their advantage. Now, Dr. Du Bois was a very smart man. He was a very smart man, but he also wanted to make sure that everybody thought the same way that he thought. And not everybody thought the way he did. Now, and he said there's 10% of the population that's smarter than everybody else, and they need to go to college so they could be doctors and lawyers and professors, and that's true. But there are a lot of old Negroes that needed somebody to speak for them. So Langston Hughes and we decided that we would be a deaf voice. So sometimes we would clash with Dr. Du Bois because he wanted those old voices to die off, and we weren't about to let him die off.
Now, we saw God's Trombone. Can you tell us a little bit, written by your friend Langston Hughes, can you tell us about your friendship with him?
You know, I love Langston. I really love Langston. I met him one time in the South, and I had just left my second husband, and he needed a ride back to New York. And Langston's problem was that Langston didn't drive. Now, how come people don't know how to drive? Now, he would buy cars and hire people to drive him around, but he didn't drive. So I told him I'd give him a ride back. It's supposed to take us 3 days. It took us 3 months. I love that man.
Don't know how we'll follow that up, but we're going to talk about your travels to other countries. You traveled to Haiti in '36.
Mhm.
Broke their eyes were watching God in only 7 weeks.
Mhm.
You talked to us a little bit about that. That book, we still study it today.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, we do.
Well, I don't know about today, I know about right now. And I'm glad that people read my book. I loved Haiti because I love voodoo. And I went to Haiti originally to study voodoo. I went to New Orleans and I studied with the last director, Sentinel Marie Laveau. And I was doing good and I was going to be the last voodoo priestess. And then I went to Haiti to practice for a while, and I met up with some zombies. Now, you may not know this, but the zombies are the undead, and they don't care about anybody alive or dead. And one time I was,
Wowzers.
oh yeah, and I was talking to some zombies, and people kept telling me, Zora, honey, don't mess with the zombies. They don't care about anybody. But everybody loved me, and I thought they would too. So, but that zombie put a fire in my belly. And when I woke up, I didn't know if I was in this world or the next. And when I realized I was still in this world, I packed my $3 dress and my $5 pistol, and I went back. But I loved Haiti. I loved the people. And I had that story to tell. I had one real love.
Janie Crawford.
And I read, Janie. Yeah, Janie's in the story, but Zora had a real love. And I had to tell people about that love. And if I never told another story, I had to tell that one. So that's why the book went so fast. That's why I was able to write it in 7 weeks.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about your letter to the Orlando Sentinel? I know I'm mispronouncing that.
Sentinel?
Lord help me. Say it again?
Sentinel.
Sentinel.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on the Brown versus Board of Education?
Well, I have a few problems with that. And it's not that I don't believe in integration, because I think people ought to be able to go wherever they want to go. But the problem with the Brown decision is that it sent out this pathological message. And it was telling people that colored children don't learn unless they're planted next to a white child. Well, black children don't learn by osmosis. And I wanted them to recognize that black children were able to learn on their own and they didn't need to be planted next to a white child. And that was my objection.
Anything else, Ms. Hurston, that you would like to tell us about your long and illustrious career?
Save the stories. That's what I would tell people. Save the stories. I have 7 books of folklore. And those are stories, just like it says, the lore of the folk. They're stories that people told me, stories that I heard from my childhood. And if you don't write them down and you don't save them, they're going to be gone. Mm-hmm. And your children, you're young now, but your children and your grandchildren, they won't know those stories. So you got to save those stories.
We thank you for sharing with us here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
What's up, Kansas City? You just heard Zora Neale Hurston as interpreted by Dr. Carmaletta Williams, who is a retired professor and a literary scholar. We'd like to thank you for appearing with us today. We have about 2 minutes left. Can you tell us, in your own words, so many accomplishments that Ms. Zora Neale Hurston has in her resume, in her repertoire? What are some things that we didn't talk about that Zora is known for?
Well, I think we need to understand that so many contemporary African-American women writers are claiming Zora as their literary foremother, and that's not by accident. Zora was truly a forerunner to the feminist movement. She is telling women in particular to claim yourself, be comfortable with who you are. Claim your power. You don't need a man to define you. And she does that early.
Now, how would Zora feel about the social media that we have today, the tools and resources that our children have at their fingertips?
I think she'd probably be baffled by it. There was no such thing. It took a week or so to get a letter from Eatonville to New York, but I think that Zora would love that. And in particular, I'm thinking about the disagreement that she had with Langston Hughes over Mulebone. If they could have picked up the phone, or if they could have texted,
they would have squashed that immediately.
Would have squashed it.
Yeah, the friendship was too valued and too deep.
And the play would have gotten produced in their lifetimes.
Recently, Howard University students named one of the bison at National Zoo, Zora, after Zora Neale Hurston. Would she have been honored?
Oh, she would have been honored. She would have loved Terry McMillan naming characters after her. She would love seeing Holly Berry play Janie in Their Eyes Were Watching God in the movie.
Excellent.
She would love it.
Yes.
She would love it.
Yeah. Last final thoughts. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in Zora Neale Hurston and your upcoming work that you're going to do with the Kansas City Library and presenting her story.
Okay, I was a graduate student at UMKC. I can't believe my phone is going up talking about social media.
Social media right there.
Social
You're at UMKC.
media. And I was at UMKC, and Dr. Robert Farnsworth was my primary graduate advisor. And he said, do you know Zora Neale Hurston? And I said, Zora who? And I spent a semester doing directed study. My friend, the late Fred Krebs, said
Go ahead.
said the Kansas Humanities Council is doing a program called History Alive, and you should do somebody. And I said, I'm a teacher, not an actor. And he said, oh no, I've seen you act. I'm like, no, you've seen me act up. But Zora said, what about me? So I did Zora, and I've done study guides on her and done some scholarly work on her.
Now tell our viewers what's up Kansas City, what's coming up on Wednesday the 25th.
Wednesday the 25th, I'll be at the downtown Kansas City Library, a Meet the Past program with R. Crosby Kemper III. And he's going to meet Zora, and they're going to have a conversation. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
And it's open to the public, and it will
Free and
appear
open.
on KCPT, the public
Yes.
channel station here in Kansas City, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Dr. Williams. I'm sorry we're out of time. Zora Neale Hurston could keep us up talking, have a slumber party and talk about her.
Yeah. And before you go,
hours of
I have
work.
a new children's book. I'm shamelessly self-promoting. This is the Zora Neale Hurston in me. I have a new children's book, J.C. and Grandma's Cane. It's the story about how a little girl learns about stroke.
JC and Grandma's Cane.
J.C. and Grandma's Cane. You can write me at drkarma5@gmail.com and we can talk about it.
Sure thing. And go online, check out more video at www.whatsupkansascity.net. And remember, the sky's the limit. Aim high. Shoot for the
Yes.
moon. If you miss at the very least, yes, you would have landed among the stars.
Got your feet off
Take
the
care until
ground,
next time.
Zora would say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
CMG wants you to always remember, the victory we call success goes to the best prepared. When you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Thanks.